stage is exactly how you do that.
I think we are going to jump straight on into Champions. Select Hong Kong Attitude are on the red side, 1907 Fenerbahçe on the blue. Oh yeah, it's the colors that
They're
confusing
colors.
you, I mean.
I know, the colors are throwing everybody off a little
Hong
bit.
Kong Attitude are on the blue side, 1907 Fenerbahçe on the red. It's a Talia and a Cho'Gath banned by HKA, and Fenerbahçe have removed the Kalista and the Jarvan.
Yeah, I'm expecting some more things to jump up here. Sejuani's been a very popular jungler, Elise as well. And then Xayah, probably a first pick, is what I would assume coming out after these types of bans coming through.
A lot of AD carry focus early on for both these teams and throughout the rest of the play-ins. You predicted it incredibly well. It is the Xayah lock-in. Does give Fenerbahçe the opportunity to pick up Rakan and Tristana if they want it.
Yeah, I actually like both of those champions you said. Unless you feel like there's some type of thing like a Maokai that's very favorable for you, but the Gragas, the jungle, some type of champion that you could pick up there. I'm trying to rack my brain right now because there's been so many junglers played in this tournament, but if you're looking for engage, if you're looking to be the proactive team, these are already two great picks to pick up.
Yeah, get the Rakan and Gragas and force Hong Kong Attitude onto some of those second-tier junglers. We have seen a lot of Rek'Sai in the last game. Broxah brought that out to great effect as well, and it looks like that might be where HKA are going. This clash of junglers is going to be incredibly interesting, especially since Crash has got a jungler that doesn't put too much early pressure on.
Yeah, but I'm kind of saying that the champion doesn't always dictate how the player's going to play it. Crash, regardless of what champion he's on, is going to be aggressive most of the time. This guy made his career that way. His debut had some incredible jungle routes. I remember people calling him the faker of jungle when he first debuted. Some of that became whispers afterwards, but he has still maintained that form in the LSPL, picking up multiple MVP awards, which is like player of the game style awards, where he is the most impactful player on his team in victories.
And his synergy with Frozen as well is going to be incredibly interesting to watch early on. We do see the Janna lock in for HKA, a support that's been on the edge of the meta throughout this tournament, and it's the Tristana as expected for Fenerbahçe.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the Janna came through, but it's an incredibly powerful pick, and we'll be seeing more of this champion. The Ardent Sensor pickup for her, the fact that she makes it very hard to engage, and you need multiple forms of engage to really reach people. Getting to unified Xayah is going to be a task. It's going to be a very hard task, because you don't just have to get his ultimate out, you have to watch for the Janna peel on top of that.
So what are you looking for if you're Fenerbahçe? What are you saying that you need in these next couple of picks? Because your mid lane and your top laner are the champions that you're looking for, but how specifically do you get onto that Xayah and actually lock her down?
So for Fenerbahçe, Frozen, I want to see him on something a little bit proactive. I want to see him on something that can dictate the pace of the game. And I feel like you might save that for last pick, and you can pick things like Gnar to try and go for lane dominance and split up a team fighting composition. But we'll see what Thaldrun goes for, because he's been on tank duty most of the time. Camille's, Rumbles, a lot of team fighters as well. We'll see what happens here.
There are a lot of different options, of course, for both these teams. And Fenerbahçe, it is their debut game in Wuhan, so there perhaps a little bit of nerves there, a few picks that will be safer for them, more comfortable for them. They have removed the Shen, Trundle taken away by HKA, and now we expect to see Fenerbahçe looking towards that top lane.
And I'm more, if I'm Fenerbahçe, I'm looking at mission more than I'm looking at Riri's. And so I like this Galio lock-in here, flex pick. Could be mid, could be top. Thaldrun and Frozen have not played it within the last summer split here. So we'll see.
It's just so many different options, and we're starting to see this meta develop a little bit more. Very AD carry focused. We are going to have the Core Keeper mission in the mid lane, and looking up towards top, it's probably going to be a tank at least for HKA, maybe even this Maokai.
Yeah, you don't know if it's going to be that Galio, so locking in something like a Gnar becomes a little bit riskier with the fact that you could flex it around. I do like the Corki pickup here because it's a good pick into something like a Galio, but the Galio can take the barrage and kind of tank it up. We could be looking at a Fenerbahçe that has a little bit more engage with that Galio on top of the Gragas.
And then finally locking in the Syndra for Frozen in the mid lane, giving him that counter pick. You said it, Zyrene. They want to get Frozen ahead. He is a key component of this 1907 Fenerbahçe lineup. On the other side of the rift, I see a lot of safety for HKA. You've got Janna disengage, you've got the Rek'Sai, you've got the Maokai as well. They are looking for a composition that just scales up well.
Yeah, Hong Kong Attitude, I see, like you said, team fighting, a lot of peel, a lot of kind of keep your distance siege, but they do have Godquai on an active jungler. So him being able to match up against Crash is going to be what I'm looking for here in the early game, because if Crash can get his lanes going, it could be a Fenerbahçe favored mid game, whereas on the opposite side, Hong Kong Attitude could make it so that this mid game composition turns on a little earlier.
And both these teams are so dictated by their early game and by whether they're able to get the initial gold lead. Fenerbahçe perhaps even more so now that they brought Crash in. Either of these teams, when they get ahead, really don't look like they're going to give up an advantage. So the first 10 to 15 minutes is where we want to focus in on, where we want to zone in on these junglers, and really see how this game develops.
Yeah, and we're talking about, the early game for Fenerbahçe. Bringing in Crash is not a catch-all solution to this. This is not, you bring in a ringer, right? You bring in somebody who's just going to dominate the game.
It's not double lift,
because, well, also, it's not just the player, it's a double-edged sword. You got somebody who's mechanically gifted, but it is a stylistic far cry from what you are used to in the jungle, and you won your region in a very dominant fashion. So Crash is going to have to synergize with Frozen and bring that back, but he's also going to have to synergize with the rest of the team, and they communicate in English.
It's definitely a struggle for them, and I think the way that this game develops, it is going to spell how well Fenerbahçe are able to develop in this group as well, because when Move was their jungler, a lot of people were saying they're the best team. They're the best team outside of the conventional regions. They're one of the best up-and-coming regions. And Fenerbahçe now need to show us that even with this substitution, even with a last-second emergency sub in the form of Crash, that they can perform to the level everyone expects them to.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is, when you get on the big stage, it's not so much about, hey, well, we end up having all of these fantastic individually skilled players. It's, hey, how well do we work as a well-oiled machine without losing lanes? So you do have to have that aspect of individual play, but you also have to have teamwork, communication, and just a well-oiled machine, because if one part starts faltering, the rest can start falling down as well. But people need to be able to bring each other back up.
I want to take a second as we get into the sort of conventional line of scrimmage here, Zyrene, to really talk about the win conditions for these two teams and try and break down exactly what the teams are aiming to do and how the enemy team can counter that. So let's start with 1907 Fenerbahçe. What are they aiming to do and how do they win the game?
For Fenerbahçe, I'm looking for an upset in the mid lane. I think Frozen getting him over mission is going to be big. As long as you can get this Cinder to a break point where she can do something about this Janna, the Xayah, or the Corki, then that's really what I'm looking for, is that early break point. Crash and Frozen, that's what I'm highlighting here for Fenerbahçe, because your bottom lane could be very stable here, but you're mostly looking for mid or late, especially since this should be a lane that is ungankable on the Hong Kong Attitude side.
Super hard to gank a Corki who's got Valkyrie, Flash, and Cleanse as well to get away. We do see some early aggression from Japone and Padden in the bottom lane. Haven't talked too much about these two. More rookies on Fenerbahçe's side. Not that much professional experience. Japone, a very new support as well. So they are more a bot lane that just needs to stay even and allow the rest of the team to play.
What they're doing right now is being aggressive, trying to hit that level 2 and be in the face of Hong Kong Attitude, because United had a fantastic first game and looked like somebody who could be a big carry for Hong Kong Attitude in the future here.
Well, Hong Kong Attitude in general had an incredibly good first game, only losing out on that perfect game because Unified dived the fountain at the end.
I think he got blasted in by Tristana.
He did get Buster shotted back, but
sometimes you just need to hit the Nexus.
Sometimes you do, especially when you're on the world stage and every win counts. We saw that over the last two groups. Dire Wolves losing out, of course, because they weren't able to secure that extra win. Both teams playing relatively safe in the early game. I like the aggression early on for Fenerbahçe, and I want to see how these two junglers continue to develop, because it looks like Crash is coming towards that middle lane.
Hanging around it at least, getting some Scuttle Crab vision control on both sides, but it just seems like they've swapped the map where you'll see Fenerbahçe take the top side, and Hong Kong Attitude will take control of the bottom side of the map here. But Crash being a little bit more proactive, walking into the jungle, and he'll be able to place vision down as well with his ward after he clears his camp, be able to keep some tabs on Godquai. But now this means his bottom lane plays safe, because you know that Rek'Sai is not on the top.
Padden's playing incredibly safe in that lane, actually. Already 10 farm down. There is a wave pushing in, so they will be able to recomp some of that, but falling behind perhaps slightly. I want to come back to HKA as well, because as Crash looks mid for a gank, HKA are a team that are perhaps undervalued by analysts. They come in as the 3rd seed from the LMS region, but They're a team that have been around for a very, very long time. Originally formed in 2013, then moving into Hong Kong esports. Never quite able to break the top 2 in the LMS.
It was always kind of a top-heavy region with Flash Wolves and AHQ. And Hong Kong esports, I mean, I remember watching them back in the day, and they had names like Toys after a bit. They even had Olay on that roster at one point. So, you know, they've been through a whole bunch and lost some players and reformed a few times, had a rebranding for the Hong Kong Attitude. And now we'll see if they're able to actually perform here.
And now they've almost reformed once again, bringing Tabe in as the coach, really trying to develop as a team. Tabe's been very vocal in the fact that he doesn't want players on his team who aren't good in solo queue, who aren't mechanically sound. In fact, he kicked Gear off the team and replaced him with Mission. Gear was this up-and-coming, he was kind of the caps of his region. And then he got replaced by Mission because Mission was higher in solo queue.
I mean, that's what he values, and that's how he's kind of going about as a coach. And I think that everybody has their own philosophies about it, but it's been working for Hong Kong Attitude. They all have respect for Tabe and what he wants to do with the game. And it's gotten them to where they are now for the first time in the Hong Kong esports history, Hong Kong Attitude history.
It's got them to Worlds, and it's got them into a game against 1907 Fenerbahçe. Very even early on here, no real advantages being taken. Perhaps a slight CS advantage for Frozen in that middle lane. Padden falling behind a minor amount in the AD carry role, but as we start to get towards these level 6s, that's where we're going to see even more impact from these junglers.
Yeah, and I'm looking already, Crash has gone for the sweeping lens on his first back. It's a little unusual that you would do this because you really want that early vision with the Tracker's Knife having 3 wards. Because like a lot of the time supports will buy that Sight Stone, but they don't swap for a good while. But look at Crash, gonna pick that one up. And just a little bit of a love tap there.
Just a tiny, a bop, just to remind him that he's there.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the item build already because, we're talking about these bops. Frozen has been bopping Mission a little bit in the mid lane, and this matchup is Syndra favored, and then she hits level 6, and if the Corki doesn't have magic resistance, then he can just get absolutely obliterated. So he's already gone for what looks like a part of a Sheen, and also towards a Hex Drinker. Once he completes Hex Drinker, it's a much easier matchup for the Corki, but until then, he's still at risk.
Cleanse, Valkyrie away, Frozen does not decide to flash across, but once again, it's Crash coming into that mid lane. They knew he was somewhere up on the top side of the map. Crash has ganked twice, and both times, 6 minutes in, he's gone towards mid.
Yeah, and I still feel like this is Frozen applying that pressure and getting them that lead, and I feel like Crash is kind of that icing on the cake there. Crash hasn't had to blow any of the summoners of Mission there, blew his Valkyrie early in the first gank, and then this time it was the cleanse because he didn't want to get burst or even test the damage of the Syndra. And so a lot of this is Frozen just applying pressure, and I want to see what he's able to do here because one of the things about Hong Kong Attitude that I noticed watching their games through the regional qualifier and throughout the play-ins, or the regular season, was that when Mission had an advantage, he didn't spread it around the map. He waited a whole bunch. Even when he had just a wave priority and a roam opportunity, he usually didn't take it, whereas Frozen is the opposite. Frozen will crush the lane, and he's a huge part of the shot calling, and is the reason that why Fenerbahçe win a lot of their games as soon as they get a small lead.
And he's a player with a lot of pedigree as well, was actually part of a Longzhu lineup where he was the keystone player. He was the player around which the team was established to be built, and then left Longzhu, and now we see Longzhu rising to world's glory and perhaps Fenerbahçe being able to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, Frozen's kind of like, don't forget about me, guys. And there's a possibility that, he could fit into one of those groups, and we'll see.
Still, not a huge amount of action yet, Zyrene, but I'm liking what I'm seeing from both teams because both are willing just to wait this out a little bit. There's always the risk of nerves in your first day of Worlds play, especially here for 1907 Fenerbahçe as it's their first game. There's always the risk that you go a little bit too aggressive, especially with a jungler who's known for those aggressive moves. Godquai as well, on the other side, is incredibly strong when he can get a lead in the jungle. But both teams respecting their opponents, understanding that this is the probable battle for the first spot in Group D.
Yeah, because Rampage didn't look so hot in their game against Hong Kong Attitude. Fenerbahçe is kind of stepping up, trying to say that, hey, this isn't a free group for HKA, and trying to contest them there. And what I'm seeing so far is just really high prioritization from Fenerbahçe on getting wards down, and they've been doing a good job of that. I believe their warding is a little bit better than Hong Kong Attitude's for the last few minutes here, but I'm also kind of turning my head at Godquai because he's on that aggressive jungler of the Rek'Sai, but he's gone Cinderhulk here, which is the first time we've seen this in this tournament where Contracts was going Warrior. We saw Broxa in the last game with Fnatic going Warrior as well. And so Godquai has opted for more of a tanky route, despite being on a team that is going to have a Maokai, the Peel of the Janna. He's just feeling like he needs to be another tank for these double AD carries, that they're going to be doing most of the work.
And just to help them out, Kaiwing is going towards that Ardent Sensor. It's an item that's ubiquitous with League of Legends at the moment. Gives you such a strong spike. Didn't see either AD carry going for that Relic Shield to try and buff it up ever so slightly quicker, but eventually the supports will be okay. Frozen gets the knockback onto Mission, but it's just going to be a love tap, as you would say. So, I mean, Mission goes back in with the Gatling gun. Godquai is around the corner. Here comes Chapone. The quickness is popped, and Mission uses the package to get to safety.
That was a super early quickness. I'm not sure what he was aiming for there. It just looked like he was just trying to be able to flash W if he was still in range, but Mission with the package to get all the way across. And he has his cleanse back up, so he's in good shape again. We really haven't seen any summoner spells burned in the first 10 minutes of this game.
Can only remember Mission having to use the cleanse in mid lane, but even then he's got it back up now, so it doesn't matter. He's going to be safe from those ganks for the time being. And I think part of us not seeing early action isn't the teams not wanting to have it, it's the drafts. The compositions themselves don't really lend themselves to too much early aggression, especially when you're playing up against people who can be very safe. However, both these teams are strong in the early games, Irene. They have good statistics in terms of first towers and first dragons. Actually, both of them hitting 62% of the first dragons and first towers in their games. Crash with the knockback, perhaps.
Yeah, I actually feel like he wanted to knock him in, and then that would have been a setup for Frozen to combo and ulti him, because Rek'Sai right now, not very tanky with just the Cinderhulk, or just the Bomby Cinder. But it ended up being a disengage.
And as long as they don't fight before it's back up, it's okay. It's one of those moments where perhaps there's a little bit of miscommunication. We've talked about Crash maybe having to talk in Korean while the rest of the team communicates in English. Godquai now being a bit more aggressive on this Rek'Sai, going into the enemy jungle, trying to steal away a Gromp, but Crash will nom down on the Toad and the Toadstool alongside it.
Yeah, as he takes that down, we see on the top side of the map, Riri's goes in, places one of those tricky control wards in the backside of red that don't get cleared a whole bunch, but we'll see if Crash sees it later. But this will give a lot of information over to HKA, because they spotted the jungler with Godquai. Now they get to take some of it away, and Frozen too aggressive.
Good flash away from Frozen, but Godquai's going to follow him up, and here comes Mission. They're looking for the first blood, the heal. Frozen dodging around, unleash power, the phosphorus bomb to the face. And that is a very dead Frozen.
And Frozen trying to protect the jungle there, even though Godquai was around, he didn't know about it, and Crash was back in base with Frozen already getting chunked out a bit. So, nope, just trying to be a little too active there, and that's the first move in this game.
And Mission is actually going aggressive, stealing away camps here. HKA in the last couple of minutes have gone for this counter jungler.
Yeah, they've been able to control the top side of the jungle with vision, and you can even see there's things like saplings around to track, and a great phosphorus bomb there to finish him off. Godquai had the ultimate, but decides not to dive there either, and just leaves that over to Mission, who you definitely want him to have that kill, because it gets him to that point where he now has three basically half-completed items.
Yeah, the Hex Drinker there as well meant that even if the Unleashed Power had gone onto Mission, he probably wouldn't have died. He now has double summoner advantage in the lane. He is looking very pretty to be able to dominate on this Corki. And what we want to see from him is a little bit more of that roaming. He doesn't do it all the time, but now he's the member of his team with the gold advantage. They're about 1,500 gold ahead, and we need to see HKA push that further.
And you can see that they're just trying to get the bottom side for Fenerbahçe here. The Hong Kong Attitude with this advantage, giving the blue buff over to Mission now. We'll see what he's able to do. Definitely want to track his roaming like you said. But as he goes for that, is this a bottom lane play here with Japone having all of his summoners and his quickness back up? Looks like they're just calling it off. So these small windows of opportunities. But I feel like mid lane has been, I would say, criminally underwarded by both junglers here, because mid lane is so important in a lot of the regions that are already at Worlds. We're talking about Korea, we're talking about North America and Europe. It's so important to have control of these side brushes, because that's where a lot of those ganks come from. Even just having a pixel brush with a control ward is so important, and right now I feel like both teams have been playing blind when they don't have to. Now that one ward, no, that's
It's
why.
the observers.
I'm still saying, like, this is still not enough. I'm seeing that ward, yes, but it's still not enough to cover that completely. When you have control of mid, you force the enemy team to bring supports up to help clear, jungles to help up, to help clear, and then you get like maybe a 2-on-1 advantage bot because the support's not there. It's something that allows you to change up the game and force things like this, where they're trying to fight over this damn control ward. This is what you need to do because the other team is playing blind. Hong Kong Attitude are playing with no vision around mid. It's a scary place to be, but Fenerbahçe, they're still playing with a little bit of vision, and now they have control of the bottom side. And I've been liking Fenerbahçe's warding just a little bit more all game long.
Have to see if they're able to utilize those blind spots, because it is only a Cloud Drake to start us off. It's not the most impactful dragon in the world, although Japone will be very happy if he can get that on himself. We are starting to see first item spikes here as well. Ardent Sensor just completed on Kai Wing. There's an Infinity Edge on Pattern as well.
Rushing those items first. You can see Godquiet and Crash. Crash going to pick that one up.
And again, it's all around the mid lane. There is a little bit more vision here for HKA. We see this ward being pushed a bit further, but Godquiet is going in blind there, especially blind because he's on the Rex side. They will be able to clear out the control ward. Don't quite get it.
They have bottom rolling up.
Back. Here comes Japone. Godquiet is low, but Mission's trying to turn it back in his favor. Again, the quickness is so early from Japone, and I don't want to highlight this weakness too much, but Japone and Pattern have often been seen as the weaker members of Fenerbahçe, and I think we saw it a little bit there.
Yeah. The quickness, being able to just bust that out and know the engage range, know your flash engage range, and be right on top of that is key to being able to play an explosive recon that we've been seeing from some teams in the play-in stage here. And like I said, you roam up to mid, you give these advantages to the bottom side, and you can see Hong Kong Attitude taking advantage of that. They might get this first turret right here.
Not quite tanks it. Crash is going to get knocked up as well. Did use the flash there. Didn't really go too far as Godquiet was able to lock him down. But first tower blood for Hong Kong Attitude, and now they are 3,000 gold ahead, Zyrene. 15 minutes in. That is a substantial margin.
Yeah, it looked like Crash just flashed in place. So losing out on that summoner spell, and it is a substantial margin now in both the fact that the jungler can now be bullied by the Rek'Sai, and he's not as much of a threat to somebody like Mission, who has the cleanse back up.
And we talked about Crash coming in and his play style, but you have to remember how much mental preparation goes into playing at Worlds as well. And you wonder perhaps if mistakes like that and some of his early jungle pathing are just because he's not as mentally prepared as some of the other teams. He's not got the synergy with 1907 Fenerbahçe that Move would have done. But all credit to Hong Kong Attitude here, Zyrene. They have played a safe, controlled early game, and they've been able to utilize their advantage as well.
It's interesting because you use the word safe, and I would agree that in the context of this game it's safe, but I feel like this is not very safe from them in terms of just overall play. They are taking a lot of inherent risks by going for all of these blind roams, all of these blind kind of attempts, where there's things like Galio on the field, right? This is something that we haven't seen Thaldrun roam around on. We haven't seen any teleports come in. We haven't seen any of these proactive global moves from these teams. And Hong Kong Attitude, well, people are saying that they're #1 in this group, but you do have to look at things in the big picture, that this team hasn't been as convincing as the #1 seed so far.
Have to agree with you there, Zyrene, but you are comparing them to Team WE and Cloud9 and Fnatic.
Yeah.
These
You're
teams,
very fair.
Yeah, in more established regions, I think Hong Kong Attitude will be very happy if they can come out of this with a 2-0, looking to tomorrow just to secure that first spot and avoid Fnatic and C9 and WE in the elimination matches next week.
Yeah, I'm sitting here like, man, I thought the European casters were supposed to be the negative ones. It's like, what am I doing here?
I'm all happy and smiles.
I know.
It's my first world, it's Fenerbahce's first worlds.
I gotta cancel you out. I gotta cancel you out. Oh.
Please don't. Please. What we want to see Hong Kong Attitude be able to cancel out now is any pressure from Fenerbahçe. They want to push up this vision line. They've got first tower in bot lane. They've got an Ardent Sensor on their Janna. They can really try and starve out 1907 Fenerbahçe from this game.
And the fact that they have that Trinity Force completed on Mission, this Corki is going to be very key in taking these turrets down. Whereas I'm looking around this map and I'm not seeing much in terms of winning lanes for Fenerbahçe. This bottom lane, you would expect it to be something they could apply a little bit of pressure on, which we saw like level 1, and then they dropped the ball with the engage and then level 2, and they've roamed a bit and tried to get elsewhere. And then the mid lane was a matchup that swaps over to the Corki favor, and then the top lane, the Galio is supposed to be able to wave clear and make it a non-interactive lane. that hasn't been what's happening at all. His turret's been taking a boatload of damage from this Maokai over time. It's below half HP already, and it's not what you typically expect here.
Especially from your veteran player as well. Thordrin is the captain, the shot caller, the main player on this team who has been in international competitions before, who has been on a big stage before, and he's the guy that you now look to and you say, okay, Thordrin, you're on Galio, you're on a champion that can make some plays, let's do some work.
It's a map swap here. So it's actually a Rift Herald first before top turret, and then it's a bottom turret rush here from Fenerbahçe. They have 2 minions left. They got to be able to engage and kill this at the same time.
There is the charm onto Riris, going to get the knock-up as well. Root onto Padonis, he's caught out. Crash there as well. Riris going low. The explosive shot, the knockback, and this should be a dead tree. Rift Herald falls off towards the top side. Padon jumps in once again, but again the engage. Crash gets the kill, 1-1. FB to HKA. Meanwhile, in the top lane, this Rift Herald is going to come in and get the second tower of the game for Hong Kong Attitude.
And now, is it the race? Yes, it is. They're going to use the Tristana bot. They're going to try to actually break that turret on the bottom side faster than a Rift Herald, and 3 people can take top. It's going to happen.
Trist is super good at taking towers here. That explosive charge can do a lot of work. Thordrin trying to defend, of course, the top laner for Hong Kong is dead, but Thordrin's going to get engaged on. The Blade Caller comes back. Godquai looking for the knock-up. The knockback from Kuwing! And Thordrin escapes. Rift Herald's going to hit him, but there are no minions here.
That was huge. Thaldrin was able to flash to the other side. They're going to actually be rewarded with an extra turret here. And now what does Frozen do? Is Frozen going to go help? Is Frozen going to go bottom? What is his call?
Still in the mid lane, they will lose an inhibitor tower, and the TP is coming in from Riris as they try and shut down Fenerbahçe here.
Stop
this is dangerous. Riris is going to get onto Padon, locks him up. He has still got the flash, but Mission's on his way. Flash over the wall. HKA still going for the engage. Inhib in the top lane is going down, Zyrene. Nothing happened for 17 minutes, and now an inhibitor is dead at 20.
There are more structures dead than people by almost 8 times the amount. It's insane. 1 on both teams, and then it's 7 plus that inhibitor. This is insane.
Is it perfect macro? That's right? No kills, lots of towers. That's perfect macro.
Well,
play.
I like that HKA went for the Rift Herald, and then they went for the push. But the big thing that actually kind of tilted it there was the TP from Riris. The fact that he went for that Tribe Rush flank, it pulled Frozen away from backing, and honestly, Thaldrin played it well top to make sure they didn't lose the maximum, but both sides are now in a position where there's so many turrets down. Fenerbahçe are now going to have super minions pushing in, and we've been seeing them kind of sit on their hands, both teams just waiting. If Hong Kong Attitude wait now, they have a naturally pushing lane that is a double-edged sword. It can funnel gold into the enemy team and like have this Tristana to pick free things up, or you use it to pull people away as a 6th man and start having numbers advantage to knock down turrets. You need to see that from Hong Kong Attitude moving forward here.
Great rotations from Hong Kong Attitude as well to be able to capitalize on a little bit of an overstay from Fenerbahçe. We did not see Frozen move. He stayed in mid lane. He pushed that wave up. And because Hong Kong Attitude were that little bit quicker in reacting, they're the ones that come out on top.
Yeah, I think that was bad from Frozen. Frozen could have gotten mid lane turret damage, could have roamed bottom so they could maybe get an inhibitor, or he could have been able to prevent the top lane. But because the Corki's winning the matchup now, he got roam priority, and Mission, we talked about it, I want to see more of that from him.
And now it's Fenerbahçe going into areas of no vision, but Mission has been caught out. Frozen not going to be able to get him down as he Valkyries away. The Baron was started. Godquai looking for the engage. They're onto the Syndra. HKA can smell the blood. They can taste it. Maokai gets in. Galio. Jump in, but here comes Galio crashing down on the dead jungler. A kill on the Maokai. A 4-man taunt. And now it's up to Padon. Double kill. Looking for more. He jumps onto Kaiwing. The root not quite going to be enough to take him down. Mission turning it back around, and Japone gets the knock up Thaldrin with a kill. Mission takes down 1, but he can't quite get onto the AD carrier. Now it's cleanup crew.
Waiting for cooldowns. They're waiting for cooldowns.
Just needs to get the cooldowns down. Mission does not have flash, does not have Valkyrie, does not have a hope of getting away. He goes down. Frozen with the kill. Fenerbahçe take 4.
And now they have to go back on Fenerbahçe's side and clear this top lane wave. They're going to be able to get funneled some gold. Padon will get this mid lane turret, and now this bottom is going to be something that has to be cleared out from Hong Kong Attitude. They're going to have to be pulled to the bottom side of the map in just a moment.
Does that just spell Baron for Fenerbahçe? Can they just play on the other side of the map?
I feel like they have this gigantic minion wave that's going to keep pushing in the top side, so it's a little bit slower. I don't think they can do the Baron just yet, but they might be able to look at something like, maybe this Ocean Drake, or at least killing some of those control wards by Baron.
Cleaning out vision so important. We see Padden actually has great statistics on that Tristana across his split, and great statistics for Tristana across this tournament. Only one loss in the last game just before this one. We saw Fnatic being able to defeat a Tristana. Here, Fenerbahçe are hoping the odds and the numbers are in their favor as they have come back from behind. It was a 3,000 gold lead a couple of minutes ago. Now it's down to about 700.
See it this once again. Mission is just running interference, and what he's trying to do is use the package and get cooldowns. He wants people to flash at him. He wants them to burn ultis. And then he jumps through, takes a lot of damage from the Baron on the backside, but then the Galio was roaming up the whole time. I was waiting for him to come in, and he gets the ulti. But even though Crash dies, it delivers him to a perfect position, and now Fenerbahçe, like you said, might set up the Baron here.
Unified is all the way down at the Ocean Drake as well. 5,000 HP on that Baron. Fenerbahçe are going to disengage.
I don't think they knew it.
Can't quite get where they want to be. Maybe there's no vision for them down there, so they didn't know that the Xayah was not with her team.
Yeah, I don't think they knew that he was there, and then he shows mid, and they have mid priority. So they'll take this turret as kind of the reward for the macro there, and Fenerbahçe kind of called on that bluff of actually the Baron.
It's so strange because in picks and bans and before this game started evolving and developing, we said early games what's important. That first kill, that first tower, that's what's really going to snowball it for someone. Those ganks towards the mid lane, but that hasn't been the way this game has played out.
Yeah, it was more of, you're looking at the junglers to see who can give you that advantage in the mid lane, in the mid game. But Hong Kong Attitude, they have perfect scaling, like we said, with the Ardent Sensor and the fact that they have double AD carry. And Fenerbahçe, they have the Tristana, and hold on, Japone gonna pull them.
It's not back a great explosive cast, but again, no vision for Fenerbahçe. They cannot push forward even into their own jungle because they do not know where Hong Kong Attitude are. Those sunglasses helping Hong Kong deny vision from Fenerbahçe, block out the sun from their enemies. You can see Thaldrin has come up to try and make sure that Hong Kong Attitude aren't able to get a good engage.
He got spotted on the wards that are around that area, and now he's kind of stacked a slow push in the bottom side of the map. This will continue to push out towards Hong Kong Attitude. So somebody has to go pick that up in the near future, and that's kind of the window of opportunity that Fenerbahçe will use to go look at the Baron in terms of picking up the vision and re-establishing control of this area.
Speaking of windows of opportunity and windows of power, we are starting to see items stack up on either side. The AD carry is so vital in team fights. We've got Infinity Edge, you've got Static Shiv and a Rapid Fire Cannon on that Tristana.
Yeah, and then on the opposite side, you do have the double BF sword items and the Static Shiv for Unified. And at this point, I actually think that the Xayah is stronger at her double BF sword power spike. This is one of the reasons people love Xayah right now, is she doesn't have to build 2 attack speed items. She gets those crit items, stacks them up, has a lot of damage, and then her W adds even more on top of it. And it gives her movement speed. It gives her all the stats that you really get from those that extra crit attack speed item built into her W, so she can buy this heavy-duty AD.
And the question then becomes, how tanky are your tanks? How much damage can they sustain through? We've got a Knight's Vow finish on towards Crash. He's helping out the team. He's helping out Padden. Actually looks like there's going to be a second one from Japone as well. Wonder if that will go towards Frozen to try and keep that mid lane superstar alive in these team fights. It's a vision game. It's a vision game.
Yeah, it's all about vision. So they're playing it pretty slow. They're trying to make sure that they can see the Baron, who has control. So that Baron dance, but it's not so much fighting over mid lane and then going to the Baron and starting it. It's more, all right, they have vision control. Let's get control of mid. Then let's go get it back. And now they have control of mid. And then they go get vision back. And so it's basically this cycle of back, get your control wards, make sure you have all the wards that you can hold, and then just keep doing this over and over again.
Top lane inhibitor has, of course, respawned for Fenerbahçe now, so it's not that pushing lane that it once was. Has funneled farm in towards Padden, but if you look at Unified, he's actually got a 40 CS lead in that lane. And no real CS advantages across the rest of the board, so that's just better rotations from HKA, making sure they utilize all 3 lanes of farm.
Yeah, Unified's kind of been the guy who gets tagged into bottom to get all of that farm. He got that gigantic wave when it showed up. And then this time they put both those Titans, who are just super tanky, in the bottom side of the map. Now Thaldrin has a bit of an advantage here in this matchup. He'll be able to clear the waves out, has that CS advantage himself. And we're still waiting for those fights, because both these teams, you want to have team fights, but both teams are usually set up for team fights. And when the other team is set up, that's not really when you want to do it. You want to catch them with their pants down. You want to go, get to a side lane, push a wave out, and then you have 30 seconds to go ahead, try to make something happen as like the Tristana split pushing or the Tristana's picking up the side wave. As somebody isn't in attendance to this fight, but both teams are just giving the respect of those 30 seconds in the waves back and forth. Right now, Maokai, he's grouped up. HKA have priority. But now, the Galio's shoved out bottom, and he's going to roll him up, and then you have to go get that bottom wave. And then now it's your turn. And so it keeps going back and forth.
And it's a breaking point. It's which team missteps or which team makes the better rotation at this point. There is a big wave down towards that bottom side.
Yeah, and it's not always mistakes, right? It's not always, oh, one team just messed up a timing window. Sometimes it's they forced something like this Baron, and now we're in a position where we decided to take the fight. And they did a very good proactive play. Like right now, it's mid-priority for Thaldrin, whereas before, it's been, hey, look at this bottom wave. Now they have priority in 2 lanes, and now you have to kind of get that back as Hong Kong Attitude. But they're going to use that for a back timer for Frozen.
Get those control wards in as well. We're seeing double sweepers as expected at this sort of point of the game, especially when you've got all of this vision game happening. And this is the point as well where you do look to your veteran players. I'm looking at missions specifically for HKA, of course, was part of TPA a long time ago. He is one of the veterans.
Yeah.
Unified, very much a rookie. He is playing well this game and has played well thus far this tournament. But when you get to these points, when you get to these real crucial breaking points in games, that's where you look to your experienced heads to make the plays.
See if Mission's able to pull something out, but he's kind of that backline Corky. I don't know if he's going to be packaging straight in. We're looking for things like Riri's to get in there. And Hong Kong Attitude, if you keep pulling this Maokai to the bottom lane and then give him like a 30-second window to engage, he doesn't get much time because you look at the rest of the Hong Kong Attitude squad, they're really waiting for you to pull the trigger. The Corky doesn't want to engage, the Xayah can't really, and she's most effective when kiting backwards, and the Janna's the disengage. So you're really looking for Riri's to get into these fights, but when you start them, you have to watch out for the Thaldrin engage. You have to watch out for all of these things from Fenerbahçe, where I feel like they have more things that are very threatening in their composition, whereas Hong Kong Attitude just don't have enough tools to force things.
And you can see Fenerbahçe now have decided that perhaps their priorities don't lie only on the Baron. There's a Mountain Drake coming up in just a couple of seconds, and with the game being delayed and stalled out, having that extra damage to the Baron and to the towers is so vital.
Yeah, and they control that area because of the fact that Thaldrin shoved this out and the Corky took it back. So right now, Corky, I'll check it for package. He doesn't have it. So right now, this will be Mountain Drake started up for Fenerbahçe, but is that too many people on it? There's pings going down from Hong Kong Attitude to go towards the Baron, but I don't think they have the timing window.
No, Unified was in the mid lane dealing with Padden and Japone. Not having to have your AD carry at that Dragon really makes it a lot easier for you to keep pressure on the other lanes of the map, especially an AD carry with such long range as Tristana.
Yeah, this has been kind of like a Dragon Ball Z episode. We're watching these two teams just yell at each other and just get more powerful. We have finally armor penetration items coming through for both AD carries. We have Gargoyle Stoneplate completed for Thaldrin, and so when they feel like they're in a comfortable spot and they're up to like Super Saiyan 3, are they going to fight then? Or do they have to go further?
It's a pretty intelligent reference there. So, I mean,
Super Saiyan 4 completed items. We'll see what happens.
Definitely a smart one. I haven't actually watched Dragon Ball Z.
Really?
That's the issue here.
You just,
so,
wow.
I don't like saying that because everyone gets really angry at you.
Just saying.
Just super saying that for you guys. Well, perhaps the power levels will be over 9,000 when these two teams do decide to fight. Still only that 2,000 gold differential between them. And you can see how much this game means to both of these two teams. Fighting for top place of Group D. Fighting to avoid Fnatic, to avoid C9, to avoid Team WE.
Yeah, and this is almost like what we had seen WE and Lion look like a little bit. Except for all the fighting, it's more of that #1 seed being pushed and tested by a team that people consider a lower seed, or is realistically a lower seed coming into the play-ins, which makes you really excited not just for this game, but for what's going to happen the next time they play each other. What's it going to look like when Fenerbahçe is going up against Rampage that Hong Kong Attitude absolutely obliterated, an almost perfect game? Because this is not Fenerbahçe in any stretch of the imagination being in a losing position versus Hong Kong Attitude here. These teams are pretty much even from just the structures and the fact that Fenerbahçe have this Mountain Drake. It's just the macro and both teams giving each other a lot of respect. I would say right now at this point, either team wins this team fight based on the approach.
And that's what I love about the current meta. And that's what I love about Worlds at the moment, because it's so teamfight focused. And there's so many opportunities for one player to stand out and just make that great mechanical outplay that wins you the game. And they're looking for a fight soon.
You see Japone, he hasn't had much in terms of engage. Is this it here?
Quickness jumps in, here comes the Galio as well, the knockback. That's a Janna, they're trying to catch up. They get the kill, Pattern gets it, and there's the taunt as well. HKA are getting decimated, double for the Tristana. Frozen caught up towards the side, mission eventually taken down. It's 3 for Pattern, he's looking for more, he's looking for 4. Can he get the Penta? Rivis locks him up, it's 3v2, but Unified can pound down from the side here. Unified's gonna get one, not quite the quadra for Pattern. Crits to jump in, it is a quadra and an ace for Fenerbahçe.
And they're going to be able to push down the mid here. They took out all of HKA, and now they're going to be able to get themselves back in that gold lead. They established something a little bit early on, but it's been something that HKA have just had control of this game. And now, basically, after all that yelling, they finally exchange punches.
And you have to give credit to Japone as well. Earlier on, his quicknesses, his engages were not on point. He caught out the Janna, he caught out Kai Wing. They took her down before the fight even really began, and we'll see it once again.
Yeah, this is what I was looking for, is this Rakan is so powerful. I definitely consider this part of the world's meta. A top-tier support that can buy Ardent Sensor and protect, but also attack. And he got that engage, exactly what he wanted there. And Unified gets left alone for most of this fight because the team says, screw that, he's so hard to get to. They just kill everybody else first and go through his front line after diving and getting the Janna first. It's a mistake that a lot of teams make. You see a Soraka, you see a Janna, you kill somebody else first, when usually the support's the easiest to get. But look at this.
Jump onto mission, they're going to try and lock him out. Japone is low, the Baron was started, mission knocked in. Pattern is a godlike, God quite chased off towards the side as well. The no, Pattern!
What are you doing?
That's not where you want to be! And Fenerbahçe will get chased down here by Rivis. Tholdren is the target as Unified comes in. You've got an AD carry, say HKA, we've already killed him. Tholdren's getting chased down. Rivis jumps in, another kill for Hong Kong. Attitude, and they're looking for the Baron.
That may be the Baron here. They have the Janna to give shields, they have a tank up, and they have their main damage dealer. What the heck was Padden doing? Maybe he thought that with his flash up and Tholdren's ultimate, he may be able to survive that, but that was just too much. That, I don't even know if we have a word for that, because we had Lee Syndrome, but that doesn't extend to Tristana. This was just insane. He jumps forward here, gets rooted, blasted, and he's just obliterated. There is no time there for Tholdren to pull the trigger. There's no time for him to flash away. That is an oopsie as soon as he hit the button.
And it's something we've seen Padden do before as well. He did it in their regional games actually as well. A lot of the time, he's seen as one of the most improved players in Turkey, but he does make mistakes. They're looking for the Baron now. HKA with 4 members, but crashes across the wall.
Yeah, this is a 4-on-3. Crash goes in. He
steals it! Fenerbahçe with the comeback. The steal from Crash. He's going to get taken down, and now HKA might look for a further engage. Rivis in the front line. Japone trying to get away. Will get the knock-up and quickness up towards the top side. Does go down, but Fenerbahçe still in this game because of a great Baron steal by Crash.
Yeah, they get the Baron here, but Elder Dragon in 30 seconds and crashes up in 40, as well as Japone. This will end up being an Elder Dragon, most likely for Hong Kong Attitude, after they start taking care of business with these turrets that are left open because of the numbers advantage.
The Baron's still not only a gift for Fenerbahçe, but a gift as they engage. Frozen gets the kill as well, and here comes Tholdren. He's going to look for the taunt, pulls Rivis away from Padden, and now Padden can open up the big guns from the backside. Tholdren's going to jump in once again. A great blade caller back as Unified tries to get some damage down of his own. Padden, don't jump in. We've seen you do it. There's the Featherstorm. He jumps away.
Pulls him back.
He pulls Rivis. He knocks him away as well with a buster shot. Padden can still do work. Tholdren can't quite get the taunt off. Unified will survive. And Fenerbahçe are able to defend that tower.
They're going to make a liar out of me because that Elder Dragon is now up in the air. God Kwai low, Mission dead, Riris dead, and it's just Frozen gone for the side of Fenerbahçe.
Let's quickly look at Summoners because there's going to be another fight soon, and it's so important what flashes are up. Unified does not have his, nor does Padden. Frozen's is up soon.
Japone, though. Japone is the one I'm looking at here because his engage from before, he's been how Fenerbahçe has been getting into the lead of this game, and now they find themselves in a deficit once more. Is it another steal?
No,
it's not going to go.
God Kwai's not going to do it. God Kwai does not have the Longzhu experience. Doesn't know, he's not Crash.
He doesn't want to go for it. It's really just a one buff anyway, but right here, it's just trading 1 for 1. high wing, little late on that, but also at the same time, was it going to be enough to save anyway? You have Mission going way too far forward. This is the carries with, mind you, ample frontliners just going way too ham.
My heart was in my hands at that moment as Paden jumped back.
Yeah, and he actually got just barely out of the range of Unified's Q there, I believe, which was following up in damage. And now you have some members of Fenerbahçe with Elder Dragon and the Baron buff, and now they find themselves with an 800 gold lead and pressure on the map.
You've got top lane towers still up for them as well, and a massive wave in the bottom lane. Does mean that Mission will deal with it, but just having the ability to pull Hong Kong attitude around the map is so vital for Fenerbahçe. It looked perhaps dead and gone for them at that Baron, but they are straight back in this game. You can feel the tension.
I know.
You can cut it with a knife here, Zyrene.
I'm just waiting.
If I were going to cut it with a knife, I'd put that butter on some crumpets. As an Englishman, perhaps Fenerbahçe would be looking to get some delicious desserts as they start to take down these towers one by one. A 2,000 gold lead for them now. You can see HKA do not want to fight while that Elder Drake and the Baron are still remaining.
And that just allows Fenerbahçe to take whatever they want on the map. And so far, it's just been outer turrets. And remember, they have that naked inhibitor on the bottom side of the map for HKA. When Baron isn't alive for a very long time, this is a point that you could siege and just push down and force Fenerbahçe, or force Hong Kong Attitude to answer. And it hasn't been a point that Fenerbahçe even want to go towards. They just keep putting Thaldrin in the side lane, and he never really has reached that inhibitor.
Both AD carries at 5 items. In fact, Paden has sold his boots to get that 6th item. Phantom Dancer completed. Bloodthirster there as well. It's been pretty bloodthirsty already this game. I'm not sure he needs any help at all. Knight's Vow from Crash aiding him. Japone hasn't actually used his Knight's Vow on anyone as far as I can see. Would like to see that going over to Frozen just to help out a little bit more. You can see not the biggest advantage taken off that Baron by Fenerbahçe, but 3,000 gold is nothing to be sniffed at.
Yeah, sometimes people actually get their Knight's Vow overwritten. If your Knight's Vow giver dies, the other one can put it on that person. So it could have been that type of situation, or Japone just hasn't used it, and that's an oversight.
So Unified was just stunned up. He's used the Mercurial Scimitar now. He needs to be very careful as to how he approaches this lane. Thaldrin's up towards the top side of the map, of course, has that ultimate to join up. Miris is up there as well, and Fenerbahçe want to join the fight. Looks like we do just have a pause coming out.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about this, guys. We'll make sure we get it sorted out as soon as possible. Fenerbahçe in such a good position. Looks like they're going to try and catch out Riris, but not quite able to take that Maokai down that quickly.
It is a pause, just to completely confirm. And I was going back and looking at Japone, and it looks like he just hadn't really used the Knight's Vow on anybody. Gave him the benefit of the doubt, but you need, and those things can like really mean a lot in these situations. You end up just having a little less HP when somebody is going for fights or getting healed not enough. And you really want to keep your carries alive, especially with how bloodthirsty Paden's been in this game.
He has definitely been jumping in, perhaps, when he shouldn't have been. His heart has been telling him yes, Zyrene.
But needs a little bit more of that mind. Just a little bit more.
Just a tiny bit. Sometimes that's where you need someone like Thaldrin just to say, okay, we've seen you do it once. It didn't cost us the game. Take a breath, Paden. You're still a rookie. Yes. I know what the stage feels like.
So sometimes, it's Thaldrin's fault. You just be like, I'm training you. I'm making sure that you can hit that R on me. Next time, just be ready. So we'll see, but that was definitely an oopsie there. But right now, Fenerbahçe in the lead by about 2,000 gold. And so there isn't too much you can really complain about right now because they have that composition that can actually push and force the issue. Whereas on the opposite side, HKA, I talked about it when they had a gold lead, they really have to siege and kind of bait Fenerbahçe into something because Riris is the one that can really start the fights with the Maokai ultimate, right? You're not looking at the Janna, you're not looking at the Xayah or Corki or Rek'Sai. It's Riris, but Thaldrin with the double globals has been pulling him to the side lane. So from a macro perspective, Fenerbahçe has been preventing sieges. Because, I'm just thinking of Hong Kong Attitude. If I was playing this composition, Maokai just walks up, R's down the entire length of the lane, and then you can put some Trinity Force damage on turrets. If they sit there and try to actually contest that, you have enough damage from your carries at this point to kind of go through a lot of that resistances that they're actually packing.
And sometimes it's hard just to make that call, though.
It is.
Especially in the heat of the moment, you think, oh, we just need to hold out. We've got the gold lead. We can just wait for them to make a mistake. very much relies on a captain to take the stand and say, this is what we need to do, this is exactly how we have to play it. And perhaps Hong Kong Attitude coming in, representing the 3rd seed from the LMS, just don't quite have that level of experience, don't quite have those level heads that you need when you get into a compositional mismatch, as this one is. Fenerbahçe, on the other hand, have been able to come back from behind. A lot of credit to Crash for that Baron steal, yes, and for them to be able to actually fight around it as well. Padden, after that one mistake, has positioned very well in fights.
It's funny because Padden is 9-1-4. And everybody's just going to remember that time he jumped in. Like, literally, it sucks to think about because you're like, man, that's what really leaves a lasting impression in your head. But he got the quadra kill before that, right? Or after that. Really, this guy has been doing a fantastic job in this game on this Tristana, and is a big reason as to why they're at this point, because he's been playing the team fights a little bit better. It's just that one mistake, but it's the one that's glaring.
But it's super exciting to see Padden being able to step up as well, because he was one of the members of this Fenerbahçe lineup that was looked at as a weaker member. The bot lane specifically has been eyed up by analysts and said this is where you take the advantage against them.
And to be fair, they haven't had an advantage during the early game. They went for like a level 1 and a wave push, and then engaged before they were level 2, even though they were going to hit level 2 first. And so everything kind of got reversed on them. They had kind of had to take the loss in the bottom lane, but then Japone went for a lot of engages that were questionable, and then he finally got 2 to 3 in a row that you're like, okay, erase that early game, and now you find yourself in a state of the game where they're in a lead because of a lot of what he was doing to get them back in and to be an aggressive player. Like, you look at the composition for HKA, man, wouldn't you just love to have a Rakan? This composition would love having that Rakan here. But the draft where they take it away after seeing the Xayah, this is put at wrench in that plan.
And it's something we're going to see throughout the entirety
Absolutely.
of Worlds. Rakan is so impactful, makes plays, and can build Ardent Sensor. It's all you really want from a support in the current meta, Zyrene. I want to just think about what Rampage are thinking at the moment as well, because they play Fenerbahçe in our final game of the day. They really struggled against HKA. Do you think they'll see opportunities against Fenerbahçe that they might be able to crack into, to break into?
It's a possibility. Like, there's so much you can draw from these games, but at the same time, there's so little, because it always comes down to draft and the habits of the players. Like, what does Crash look like when he's not on Gragas? What does he look like when he's on a more aggressive jungler, right? So there's all these things that you have to consider. Right now, what you can really look at, though, is how Fenerbahçe understand what they need to do as a team composition against the other team. It's not just, oh, we need to do this to win. It's, hey, pull the Maokai away with the Galio. Hey, we don't want to give them engage tools. They ended up making sure that they couldn't get things like the Shen and the Kassadin. So the Shen would have been able, or the Kassadin would have been able to 1-3-1 and answer something like the Galio, right? So their pick and ban was actually pretty clever from Fenerbahçe to make sure that they could execute their strategy with the Galio that they got in the second round. Or I guess after the second ban phase, I guess I'll say it that way because there's so many second rounds. Yeah. The second ban phase, that they were able to split the map and stop the primary engage from HKA from being there. So I really like the fact that they understand how to adapt in the games.
And on the other side, HKA did get the early advantages. They were the ones pushing up. I'd like to see perhaps a little bit more imperative from them, a little bit more of mission moving around the lanes, looking towards even starting up 4-1s, setting up for those bot lane dives on something like a Corki and a Rek'Sai, where you can jump in and out of turret aggro a lot easier.
Yeah, I've been pretty critical of their vision control. I feel like they're kind of just flexing muscles and just saying they're better mechanical players.
There's nothing wrong with flexing muscles, Zyrene.
True, true. It's always entertaining, right? Because you're going to have somebody like face check. You're going to have two people come up on each other. They haven't been able to. They haven't been putting a whole bunch of wards around, and it's been to their detriment as the game has gone on. And Godquai's kind of been leaning on the fact that he's playing Rek'Sai, right? There were a few times where Frozen was around with Crash, and then he spotted him just barely with the Tremor Sense. So, kind of circumventing that issue with this pick. Not a huge fan of it in general, just as a playstyle thing. Because like we've been saying, what can you actually gather from this game? Hong Kong Attitude take a lot of risks that don't look like risks because they're good mechanically, but they don't ward as much as you would think, and they don't control mid as much as you would want either.
Well, we are still in the pause, guys. Apologies for that, of course. We're going to hand it over to Drakus and the analyst desk to break down how this game has been developing.
Thank you very much, Medic. Of course, we're not always your favorite people to see in the middle of the game, but luckily I have some analysts with some interesting insight. Maybe we can take a chance to break down the early game, look at exactly what is happening here between these two teams.
Right, I think a lot of what we were saying about HKA is kind of coming true in this game. We were saying that the bot lane was a potential point of weakness for the side of 1907 Fenerbahçe. That's also one of the potential strengths for HKA, so it's no surprise that, kind of 2v2, that goes in their favor. They break that turret early on. That's where they kind of started getting the game rolling for themselves.
Yeah, things were looking pretty positive for HK in the early game. They also had the rec side. They had a lot of options available to them. Just looking across some of the other options as well. Running a Janna after quite a few of the supports were banned away was a little interesting because the fact that we're seeing slightly less of a priority on this Alistair as an answer to Rakan is something that I've just noticed as a slight shift. But it felt like that they wanted to go for more of this peel style. They also had the Maokai as an alternative form of engage. But in terms of the early game, everything was looking pretty good for HK.
Ultimately, it felt like once we got out of the early game, though, things really started to slow down. It did not feel like HKA were quite as comfortable as they were against Rampage to just snowball any kind of lead. What do we think is the big difference here in this game?
I think what we were saying was, one, Vedius was talking about their team fighting, which I'm sure you'll get into in a second. And the other thing was, when things start to break down for them in the macro sense, it does feel like they get into a little panic mode. And so the best example of this was that crazy turret trade that happened between these two teams, where Rira steps forward, tries to defend the turret, he goes down, and then rather than trying to cut their losses or anything, they go full trade mode. It ends up working out for them because they're able to grab the inhibitor, but you see them losing flashes, they're losing summoners, and they started losing control of the game a little bit during that point.
Yeah, and my eyes were very much on Frozen in that whole instance because he had to make a decision between trying to help his teammates in the bottom half of the map, trying to help them live, or to try and help in the top half of the map to try and keep his inhibitor alive. And he eventually made the decision to keep the bottom side alive. They ended up losing the inhibitor, and you're like, that's kind of a risky decision. But then at the same time, because HK never really continued to push that, it just resulted in a lane that was constantly pushing in their favor. You then allow the gap to close between Pattern and Unified, and now this Tristana is sitting on 3 items and getting to a point where he becomes this big threat.
And it wasn't just that inhibitor, right? Immediately following that exchange, we saw a team fight take place, and this is where we really started to see some of those weaknesses we talked about for HKA to come into fruition because, yeah, you just won. You just got that inhibitor. It's a good look for HKA, but when we take a look at it again, ultimately, you immediately throw that away by taking a team fight, and it really, to me, it just felt like a failure to execute.
Right, I think that's the big thing is you saw weird stuff where, like, a mission is way over the wall on Corky, they start engaging onto him, he uses his package to get out, now he's not too close to the fight, then they engage. There's a lot of those problems that you're going to see in that replay when we roll it. It's just like a huge breakdown between the two teams and what they were trying to do, and HK, this is the problem with them, they don't execute super cleanly in the 5v5 setting.
It's also important to remember how their actual comp makes it very difficult for them to get this kind of reliable engage, especially against things like a Rakan. So as we see the play roll out, what you'll see is that HK are mainly just setting up around the Baron. They're using this as an objective to force the fight. But then they all commit to the Baron while Mission is still isolating by himself. He's then forced to Valkyrie out with the package, and now they're going back for the re-engage. And this is the sort of thing that we were discussing earlier. One of the reasons why I thought Rampage could have the edge was because they just seem a little bit uncoordinated when they try to force these fights. Players go in while the others go out. The target focus seems a little bit all over the shop, and 1907 Fenerbahçe were very quick to punt.
And you see Unified does a decent job in this fight, trying to somehow win it for them, almost trades back onto Padden. There's a number of fights between these two AD carries where Padden keeps coming out on top. And so it's going to end up being probably on those two as this game continues to make the big play, ultimately decide how it's going to go. But this was the big thing that got Fenerbahçe back into this series.
And well played to capitalize on that opportunity. And just an update to everyone, we have confirmed that the pause was due to some network instability. They are still working on an answer to the problem at the moment. But for now, we will continue our discussion about these games, about these two teams. And I have to say, one thing I really like coming off the bat from Fenerbahçe is that they did not collapse in the laning phase. And after how strong HKA looked against Rampage, not to pour any salt in your wounds, Vedius, but it's good to see that they can go toe-to-toe in the laning phase because it feels like HKA just get lost, as you said. And if you can survive, they don't feel like quite the same level of titanic team that they did in that first game.
And I actually really like that because it makes the group interesting. I think we've seen a lot of Pool 1Cs just kind of smash their competition. Right now, Hong Kong Attitude's in a fight for their life a little bit to make sure that they do walk away with this win. And I think it's the kind of thing where Fenerbahçe can keep playing them close like this. They have some things that work out well. They did get that Baron steal as well. Padden, you heard Cyrene kind of lamenting it, jumped in, threw away that big lead. It's what a lot of people are going to remember. But their team fighting definitely is coming out a lot better than Hong Kong Attitude.
I mean, one of the things that we were discussing about Fenerbahçe coming into this tournament is, or I mean, this group in particular, is that there are a bunch of different styles. And I think one of the things that we praised HKA for was that they seem to have fairly strong laners. When it comes into the late game, if they're the ones in dictating the pace of the game, they know how to close things out. But when the challenge is things are even, that's where things get a little bit harder for them. And what you can say about 1907 Fenerbahçe is that they usually are the team that has the tempo domestically. They're the team that has the advantage, the early game advantage, that they very quickly snowball in their favor, or they have control over the map. And what we're seeing from both these teams is just slight adaptations coming into a group, because you're now going up against completely different styles. You're going up against different regions that have different focuses. And in the case of Rampage earlier on, they heavily got punished for a style that they weren't used to. And now we're seeing this slightly different style where 1907 aren't getting this early dominant lead, but at the same time, they're against a team where they seem to be able to match them in some of the plays they're trying to make.
And it's another thing, too, where 1907 Fenerbahçe having a game to watch of HKA let them know what to ban. So you saw the J4 banned out right away. That was a huge problem in snowballing against Rampage. So that is one of the things that kind of plays in is Fenerbahçe have that small advantage in the draft.
And we have to praise that adaptability, too, because we've seen teams struggle from day to day to figure out what the best option is. We saw Rampage kind of struggle to figure out what they wanted to do in the first game, but seeing Fenerbahçe take the information from that game, use it into their next game. And the other person we have to praise is Crash. He's coming into this team. There's a communication barrier here. There's a lot of struggles. But when you have those single moments where Tristana leaps in a little bit too aggressively, he was there to back the team up. He was there to steal that Baron away. And ultimately, he is keeping them in the game right now. So regardless of anything else, he has been a positive factor, at least in the context of this game.
And I was curious as to how he would perform coming into this game, because expectations were, from what I've heard, is that he's all about the early game. He's all about snowballing. He's trying to get these lanes ahead. He drafts himself to Gragas. You still have the ability to do that, but he doesn't try and force anything too hard. He seems to be going back to the style that Move was known for within 1907 Fenerbahçe, and I think that right now he's synergizing pretty well with the team, which is great, considering that I imagine they don't have a huge amount of practice with him, and you're playing at Worlds for the first time.
I think that's a huge point, just because he is not the problem, which is the big scary thing coming in with a new player. It's more that in the early game, Japón was missing a lot of those engages. He was really kind of feeling the nerfs a little bit on the recon changes, on the hitbox, on the quickness. So I felt some of those things can get cleaned up. Padden is also team fighting. Just don't throw the game away right there. Those are things that, assuming Crash continues to play decently well, the rest of the team can step up with him.
Which is good, because I think ultimately when we look at the pressure on his shoulders, right, when you look at the impact that he's expected to have, you ultimately expect him to be a deterrent. Him performing well is a good start. And you have to think for the team, they're terrified. For Move, he's terrified. His team is up there playing without him because he can't get in. He doesn't have that visa. And you have to wonder if everything just falls apart here, if this, unfortunate circumstance takes everything down. But the fact that the team is still performing, I think, once again, just remains a huge positive point for Fenerbahçe, that they aren't horribly affected by this unfortunate circumstance that causes that emergency substitute.
And I think now we're at a point in the game where I believe 1907 Fenerbahçe are the ones applying pressure to the opposition. The last thing I remember is a Syndra stun in the midst of about to hit a Maokai. So, to me, it felt like the game state was still very even between the two teams because of a few risky plays being made by the side of 1907 Fenerbahçe.
Yeah, both teams having some risky plays. The Baron Steel going over, that leads into that Elder Dragon that they have. So there is a moment of power here, but the gold lead's super, super close. And that's why it does feel like with both Unified and Padden being the main damage dealers right now in their team compared to the rest of everyone, it's going to come down to which of them doesn't die in a team fight, because both Maokai and Galio can lock down a member if they find their target.
So from with what we've seen so far, who do you think is the safer bet when it comes to deciding a team to come out on top in this game? I feel like Hong Kong Attitude have been on the back foot a few times, but also Padden has been a little unpredictable, been a little bit too forward a few times. Can you reliably, do you feel like this is a reliable prediction to make?
Is it really okay to ask me to make predictions?
Hey man, we're forgive and forget, You're welcome to say whatever you want now.
But to be fair, I mean, you completely gave up on Rampage at the first sign of struggle, so yes. I'm wondering now,
Given the current game state and how the majority of fights have been going, I would hedge my bets on 1907 Fenerbahçe. However, I wouldn't count Unified out, because what I have been seeing from their fights is he has been stepping up. His positioning has been good, his target focus has been good, and he's been doing the best that he can. He just needs the proper support of his team around him in order to truly succeed.
I think that's the big thing is 1907 Fenerbahçe, the rest of the team started elevating their play and allowing Padden to really carry. So as long as they can keep finding targets like they've been doing, and then Padden snowballs through these fights very well, I think it probably is on them to win this game. HKA are going to need to find a different approach because what they've done recently is not working. The Janna's getting blown up at the start of fights. Mission feels like he's trying to trade 1-for-1 with the Syndra when it's like, you're going to out DPS that champion if you just stay backline, pelt with rockets, and try and melt down this very tanky Galio. A number of times, he just dies way too early in these fights. So HK still have a very reasonable chance to come back into this game, but Fenerbahçe are looking better.
And if Fenerbahçe get the win here, now you've already got 2 teams tied in Group D. If Rampage somehow gets some miraculous win later on against Fenerbahçe, then you have this really tight-knit group. And it just comes back to what we were saying earlier on the day, where Group D, it is very difficult to predict who ends up on top. So I think that already this group is turning into quite an exciting one.
All right, well, unfortunately, I do have an update for you. It's vaguely positive in the end, although unfortunately, due to the connectivity issues, a few players did end up dying. The League Ops team is now attempting to chrono break the game. Woot woot for chrono break. Hopefully, we will be able to get back to a game state pre-connectivity issues and get back into games shortly. But drawing back into the conversation at hand, I think the interesting thing to me is we talked a lot about this tournament. I think everyone did about Ardent Sensor and the impact that it would have in the game. And Janna, I think the quintessential Ardent Sensor support, I feel like we are starting to see some of the weaknesses in tunneling on the power of these champions.
I think it's partly tunneling a little bit too much because, yes, there is a lot of engage on 1907 Fenerbahçe's side, but also just not playing it very well, getting isolated out at the start of the fight and then flashing into the rest of the enemy team as opposed to flashing out. He's died a couple times early on when it feels like if the Rakan doesn't instantly blow up the fight, the Janna should be more effective as time goes on. So there's been a small issue there for me.
Personally, I think that Rakan is also just one of those champions that can do both things, which
right,
is
exactly.
like super hard engage, not necessarily act as a front line, but he can soak up a lot of damage, and because of his mobility, he then just gets out. And he can build Ardent Sensor because it's really easy for him to shield up not just one target, but multiple, but because of how his E works. So I think that just as a champion right now, he's really, really good. But at the same time, Janna is also slightly harder to play in terms of positioning being the crucial thing. And I just really want to come back to, like, HK have a really tough time actually being able to engage fights because Rek'Sai and Maokai, like, you think of them, yes, they can engage. But when you compare that to someone like a Rakan, like a Gragas, with a follow-up of a Galio, that's like that engage compares nothing to what 1907 Fenerbahçe can do when these fights actually start.
And I will say, I think it was very smart of them to take that Rakan away. The Xayah first pick is something that's gone on, and teams have not separated the pair a couple times. And you see how disastrous it is, giving that little bit of extra power to the Xayah Rakan combination. So I like that Fenerbahçe split those two up, gives them an engaged tool, and I'm sure HK would have taken that if they had the opportunity.
And I think it's interesting, too, because we've seen so many different levels of Rakan. We've seen a lot of Rakan bans, but when he does slip through, I feel like we have such a varied level of performance. Do we feel like with the nerfs to his kit, it's ultimately just a lot more down to the individual player to make this character work? Or is he still really that powerhouse where he can be a very early priority pick?
Well, so they took away a little bit of the ease of access to that power, but the power is still there. It's not like the combination of R flash W is gone or anything like that. So you can always hit that if you're accurate. They just made it a little bit harder. So if you're talking about good Rakan players, they're basically unfazed by some of these nerfs. I mean, it's not negligible. It does raise the barrier of execution, but if you're confident in it, you can execute it.
I mean, it's important to remember that the nerf itself was like onto the W because it now scales more with the base. I mean, the base value was increased and it scales less with the amount of movement speed that you have. And the combo was use your ulti, you get bonus movement speed, you then use your W, and it's like a really instant engage. But now, because that's been nerfed, the flash engage is the more reliable way to actually start fights, and that hasn't changed at all. If you have a taunt and then you flash, you are going to get hit, and you are going to get chain CC'd. So.
And it's still effective, but I'm just wondering when we look at Hong Kong attitude, they have not lost the game yet by any means, but it does feel like the Janna has put them in a little bit of a tough spot. Yes, it did ultimately win them the lane. It did give them very many advantages early on, but if they're going up against a team where they know, hey, we might not be able to snowball as hard, when we look at draft coming into the next game, whatever the result, do you think this is something that they maybe need to reevaluate in terms of having more aggressive engage options?
I mean, I would challenge that a little bit because when I look at this draft from HKA, again, something we've been saying a few times is like the engage, but I'm very much looking at, I don't think the way they play the comp is poor. It's just like their decisions on what to do next, because they had a pretty good early game and they never really knew what they should do with it. Like, you don't need engage to be able to siege onto towers. Like, playing around vision is fine. often we saw them go up to Baron and they just start it. And they're like, oh, we'd use Baron to start a fight. Where in actual terms, like that's way better for 1907 Fenerbahçe because as you're disengaging from the Baron, they can then find a really easy way to engage upon you with their comp. So they needed to find better ways of either finding picks or sieging onto towers or just better utilizing that early game lead they built themselves.
Right, I would put a little less on the Janna pick as well. That's something that they have played before in the past. It was more that Gogkwai had better engage options. He's someone who would pull the trigger quite a bit. And on Rek'Sai, you don't quite have that ease. I mean, yes, you can go for a flash on burrow play. That's great, but it's hardly ever a team fight winning play. It's usually like, oh, we found a pick off at the right time. So I think while I understand, given how the bans played out, that he didn't really have something else he might have wanted, Fenerbahçe took away the Gragas early on, but it is something where if you're looking for more engage options, it doesn't have to come from support for me.
Yeah, all right, well, we're going to see how the rest of this game unfolds before we go any further for either of these teams. Chrono Break was successful, so we're going to send it back over to the casters to get us into game shortly.
Thank you very much, Dracos. Now, Zyrene, Fenerbahçe are 2,000 gold ahead. They're sieging mid lane, they're sieging top lane. We're going to get straight back on into the game as soon as possible. What's next? What's going to happen next in this game?
Yeah, so I'm always going to be watching the Gragas with Crash, and I'm going to be watching the Rakan with Japone, like they were saying, the engage options for Fenerbahçe superior to what they have on the side of Hong Kong Attitude. Hong Kong Attitude, like Vedius was saying, though, had options of sieging. Those are long gone right now, and now Fenerbahçe are in the driver's seat. So that's what we're watching for is the next team fight or two team fights that'll come out here.
Looks like Baron has just expired as well on Fenerbahçe, so they don't have that advantage. No Elder Drake for them left as well.
Somebody should be going bottom. There's this gigantic wave. There is no inhibitor turret. I'm just saying, this bottom lane has been open for a very long time. We're talking minute 20.
Got to take it. You got to take towers. You got to break those towers when you can. But now, without the Baron buff, it does look like Japone's trying to get some vision down towards that bottom side. It opens up the map a little bit more. This is what we've seen Fenerbahçe actually do better in the second half of the game, is vision control.
Yeah, so Fenerbahçe, get your blue buff on Syndra, push this wave bottom, don't let them clear it out, keep Thaldr on top side, and Baron is up in a minute 30 seconds. I feel like they should siege this, and you can get that bottom inhibitor, and then you have the best inhibitor to have down when you're doing Baron.
What are you backing for, Pat?
I don't know what he's backing for. He's full lineup. There's nothing to back for.
I guess you can get some wards on that Eye of the Oasis. Japone duoing, and he needs someone to hold his hand.
He's going to go red buff.
As he goes back.
Yeah.
Going to go towards red buff. Baron is up in a minute here. This is where we really see these teams come into their own. Basically, the next fight wins the game, especially if Fenerbahçe get it. If Fenerbahçe get it, you push bot, you take the inhibitor, you take the game. If Hong Kong Attitude are able to win the next fight, they push top, they take the inhibitor, they win the game. We are in the final moments, the final minutes probably, of this matchup.
And this is where it gets incredibly tense. It's just everything that's led up to these moments. It's all about what you do with them. What advantages you have, pretty much negated now. People are sitting at those 6-item spikes. Wave manipulation, prep, and how you play the fight is what matters here.
And you've got 4 games to prove yourselves here in Plains. Or maybe 5 if you get
Not a lot.
Not a lot at all. This is 25% of your wins if you take the victory. Crash, caught out slightly, take some damage. He'll be able to back away. Can get some regen up, of course, with that Happy Hour passive. Gives him some of his health back, clears out the way. Bot lane pushed up by Thaldr now. Fenerbahçe have pushing lanes in the top, in the bot. Baron up in only 12 seconds here, Zyrene. They could try and just get in from the backside, jump across that wall. Tristana has such great range as well. Takes the Baron incredibly quickly. But still, Hong Kong Attitude are not giving this game up. They want their second win. They want to be undefeated in Group D. They want to avoid Fnatic and Cloud9 and Team WE. I keep saying Fnatic, they haven't actually secured first spot yet, so I shouldn't curse them that much.
Typical EU.
I've cursed Fnatic before in the EU OCS, okay? I shouldn't do it this time. But HKA are still fighting for their lives in this game. Everyone is completed build. Even the supports are completed. In fact, Kawing's so completed, he hasn't even got control ward slots. That is really end game for supports, an end game for both of these two teams as well.
Japone still hasn't put his Knight's Vow down, so that's once again a head scratcher. And also looking at the Corki build, once you hit that late game Corki build, usually you're looking at something like, hey, maybe we're throwing in the Void Staff, right? Some type of penetration item, but he's gone for more survivability here. with the Maw and upgrading that. Doesn't want to be blown up by anybody. And his team has opted not into a lot of those Knight's Vows like the other team has.
Instead going for the Gargoyle Stone Plates, the Adaptive Helms, the Randuins, the Thorn Mails. So many tanks on either side, and having that extra penetration, having the ability to shred through those tanks wins you these late game fights. Still, the Galio and Maokai sit down in the bottom side of the map. No real vision for Hong Kong Attitude. There's one ward in the pit. Mission is able to clear out the control ward and get himself away. And once again, we see it's about that vision game, Zyrene. Both these teams so patient, so subtle in their movements, so willing to wait out the enemy and make sure that they have the perfect setup before they look for these team fights.
Yeah, literally nobody is clearing minions because they need gold on the side of Fenerbahçe. You're clearing minions because you want to be able to do something with that pressure. And look at that, Godquai,
Charm,
got away.
but is able to get away. Input buffering, helping Godquai there.
Yeah, nothing stops the Rek'Sai tunnel once it's put in. Even stuns and the charm, it's knockups and displacements that will stop.
He's able to get away. That is an explosive cast used and a quickness, and Japone has been so instrumental in these fights. It has been the quickness that has set Fenerbahçe up for success. The knockback onto Godquai. Once again, HKA just eking out any vision they can get in this river, and now as a four-man squad, they will advance and claim the river for their own.
Fenerbahçe, they've missed opportunities to go for that bottom side. They can't do it now because Baron is up, and now it's really on, hey, can Thaldrun ever push in and look at that? But I feel like now it's just positioning for the fight. But who's going to get impatient? That's kind of the question that I'm thinking here, because we've seen Padden jump forward. We've seen, Japone look for engages and try to force it when, we're looking at him being 2 levels down over the other support. He doesn't have his rank 3 ultimate just yet. Still needs a little bit more experience. Is he going to get impatient and jump in? That's kind of the nail-biter here for the Fenerbahçe fans, is what's going to happen.
And which members are going to define the fight for both teams as well. We've seen Padden get that quadra kill earlier on. We've seen Unified actually play some great Zyra positioning. Not quite tunnels in, gets knocked back, but Fenerbahçe, without Crash, who's up on the top side of the river, have to just secede some of this ground. They have to just give in a little bit to Hong Kong Attitude. Is there a way that one of these teams can force the enemy to misposition, or is it all about trying to find the perfect engage? The knockback on Godquai once again, but he's going to escape and regen. He's got an Ocean Drake to help him out with that.
Well, the way that you would force somebody to misposition is by abusing globals and trying to push them out, but I don't think Thaldrun can really push over Iris. And then at the same time, it would really just be Crash with his ultimate. I feel like that's the big one to force people in different positions and try to start a fight. Now you can see Thaldrun moving up. They're going to start this Baron. This is a commit because they may get Maokai TP here because he's pushing down the bottom side. So, okay.
It felt like they could have waited another second on that Baron.
Yeah.
It felt like they could have just taken a little bit more time. They did have Thaldrun coming up through the river as well.
Yeah, you can lure them in, and you have Japone for that hard engage, for that heavy fight starter. And then the follow-up, like Rakan plus Galio, is disgusting if you're able to land on carries.
All summoners up for both teams as well, so we're going to see flashes aplenty in this next fight. Looking at Japone, looking at that engage, looking at Crash as well, who's landed a couple of good explosive casks. Looking at down towards the bottom side of the river at Elder Dragon now. The second spawning, the second coming of the Elder Drake. Back stopped actually there as HKA started up. There's no vision. There comes the long-range totem. But is this too little, too late? Holy moly! Frozen steals it away. Japone's going to jump in. Here's Thaldrun as well. Jumping down with the hero's entrance. And now HKA need to win this fight because otherwise they are done for. A four-man taunt. The knockback. The cats come out. But is it too little, too late for HKA? A great route up. Godquai jumps onto Frozen. But it's the front line of Fenerbahçe that are taking the damage. And it's the back line that are dishing out the DPS. Padden jumps in. A double for Tristana. And Padden is on an absolute tear this game. That has to be it. Thaldrun's dead. Maybe they can't close because Unified and Kai Wing are still alive.
And Frozen is so low. Unified, like you said, oh, the minions. He didn't get in the bush. He's going to have to clear them.
He's going to clear them out, but Fenerbahçe are just going to push in for this inhibitor tower. They've got a big minion wave. Unified will be back in time to try and save his Nexus towers. Can he do it?
Crash has Flash and he has Cask. He could engage if he wanted. Unified has nothing to stop it.
We're looking for the flash. Cask from Crash. He jumps in. That's a dead Zio as Frozen takes him out. Fenerbahçe going to close out this game. It's a 50-minute classic, but Fenerbahçe stamp their mark on Group D.
Fenerbahçe get the first upset of the tournament, taking down and giving the Pool 1 seed their very first loss.
And what a way to do it, Zyrene. Held on to hope for so long that game. Able to finally secure it with some great engages. 2 Baron steals as well, one from a Syndra. That is a way to take your debut game in Wuhan for Worlds 2017.
Yeah.